Hi, my name is Sean Patrick Higgins. I am the Digital Literacy Coordinator at Self-Enhancement Inc., SEI Academy, the computer science teacher for the middle school. There was a story told before about a pet that had passed away, and I had a very similar story. When I was younger, I moved around a lot. My mom had me when she was 18. And so I lived with my grandmother, lived with my dad, lived with my mom, bounced around. When I lived with my grandmother, my mom and dad lived in the city, but my grandmother lived out in the forest. They had kind of built their own house. It was maybe 2 hours away from Philadelphia. And she had all kinds of animals. She had 2 cats, 3 dogs. When I lived there, I think this is when I'm about 6 years old. And she had some ducks. And I remember that we had 2 rabbits. I think I was about 4 or 5. We had these 2 rabbits. And they asked me to name them. And I had a little baby cousin. She was 1 year old. And I asked her, I was like, what should we name them, Lauren? She goes, Goo Goo, Gaga. So we named the rabbits Goo Goo and Gaga, because that's what my little cousin said. And I love these rabbits. They're always cool. I always bring them in. It was 1 guy, 1 girl. And 6 months later, I came back, or I woke up, and they told me they had escaped. And so I'm about 6 or 7 maybe. And I thought that, and I was like, oh, I can't believe they escaped. We had this whole pen that they had outside. And I was really sad about it. And it wasn't until, I think I came back my 2nd year in college, so now I'm like 20 years old. I'm at my grandmother's house, and I'm walking around the house. And I get to the old rabbit pen. And I'm looking at it. And I think to myself, there's no way these rabbits could have ever escaped this thing. And I go in and I'm like, how did Goo Goo and Gaga escape? And my grandmother looks, and her eyes get big, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, honey. They didn't escape. A fox got in. And she's like, I thought you knew. You didn't see all the blood? I was like, I just don't remember that at all. So apparently a fox came kill my rabbits when I was 7 years old. And no idea for 13 years. And it didn't hit me till 13 years later that I'm like, wait, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I think that's the only story that I have about a tragic pet disappearing. My name is Sean Patrick Higgins.
What's your occupation?
I am the Digital Media Coordinator at SEI Self-Enhancement Inc. I'm also the computer science teacher in the SEI Academy. There was a story that was told earlier about a pet that had died, and something similar happened to me. I moved around a lot when I was younger. My mom had me when she was 18. My mom and dad lived in the city, but my grandmother lived out in the forest, way out there, like 2 hours north of Philly. You had to drive down her lane. It took about 15 minutes driving through the woods to get to the house. And they had all kinds of animals. They had 3 dogs, 2 cats. We had ducks. And I remember when I was about 6, 7 years old, we got 2 rabbits. And they asked me to name them. But my little baby cousin was right there, Lauren. And so I took it to her instead. I was like, well, I can't name them. They might be mine, but I can't name them. I'll ask her. And I was like, what do you think we should name them, Lauren? And she's 1.5 at the time. She's like, just starting to talk. And she goes, Goo Goo, Gaga. And so we named the rabbits Goo Goo and Gaga. It was I think Goo Goo was the guy rabbit, and Gaga was the female rabbit, the girl rabbit. And I love these rabbits. I took them all over. I brought them out to my bedroom a lot. We built this this cage. My dad came down from the city, he helped me build it, and we built it with like tin fencing. So real sturdy. And I guess it was about a year later, I'm probably turning about 7, and I wake up. Maybe I was gone for a day, I can't quite remember, but I come back and the rabbits are gone. And my grandmother comes and she's like, oh, they must have escaped during the night. And I was real sad about it. And, you get over it sometimes. But, I'm like, well, Goo Goo and Gaga are free. They're going to get a life out there. Maybe they'll have some kids, and it'll be good. And a couple years later, well, it's not till college I think it's my second year coming back from college. So I'm about 20 years old, going to Syracuse University, and I'm coming back visiting. And I'm walking around my grandmother's house, and I go by the old rabbit pen. That's still, this is 13, 14 years later, still standing. Fence is still looking good. It's rusty now. And I'm looking at it, and it's like 3 feet off the ground. It's sturdy metal, and there aren't any holes in it. And it hits me, there's no way that the rabbits could have escaped from this pen. And I go and I'm like, Grandma, how in the world did Gugu and Gaga escape? And she looks at me and she's like, oh, honey, I'm sorry. And there was a fox that came in, apparently. And Gugu and Gaga just weren't long for this world. And I didn't realize. And it took me 14 years. I mean, I probably walked by that rabbit pen 200 times. Never occurred to me that that my rabbits got ganked by a fox. So now that I know, if I have kids, when I have kids, if we ever get rabbits, I will make sure that every fox within a 5-mile radius is murdered. I'll make sure there are no foxes anywhere near them, and be very careful with my kids' rabbits.